Welcome. It's yet another day of Bhagavad Gita Sadhana. I'm Atmadarshan or Laura. If you wonder why I do this at the beginning, it's because I know there's a lag sometimes in when YouTube picks up the video versus when I start. So hopefully you're not missing out on any of the fantastic content. Today we're resuming our exploration of what's your path, as the Gita outlines 18 distinct paths for your yoga practice or your life. And chapter 18 is a doozy. We're on the final path, but it can be a confusing quagmire when you first look at it. And that's okay. In chapter 18, Arjun asks Krishna a question at the start that seems a little nitpicky. It can reflect one of two things: either Arjun's reversion to a more childlike state. If you've ever had kids asking you questions, you know some of them can be like, oh, that's interesting. I've never thought of it that way before. And it could also reflect that Arjun is reaching a different spiritual level. Many traditions say that the more spiritually advanced you become, the more like a child you do become. But it's a valuable question. Krishna addresses that question a bit and then goes into a huge review of everything they've talked about before. And that is considered quite important. First of all, if you're a novice reader of the Gita, you get to chapter 18, you're like, I don't remember a darn thing by now. And so it's wonderful to go back and review. But even if we've read it, and I've read the Gita many times, there's always something new that you pick up because you're always a different person. And you might go, wow, I've read that chapter again and again, and this verse has never stood out to me, or this concept seems to have escaped me, or now I get it. Doink. So this is the chapter that starts off by remembering and reviewing. And how can that be important? Because we forget, right? Our brains are made to forget. Not in everybody, though. Some people have what's called eidetic memory, but most of us do not. Why do some of us forget? Krishna says earlier in the Bhagavad Gita, if you remember, that he is actually the source of memory, but its loss as well. Our divine self helps us remember things and helps us forget. Why would we want to forget? Well, from the Bhagavad Gita point of view, it said that Arjun purposefully in that life took birth forgetting who he had been before, so that Krishna could narrate the wisdom of the Gita to him. It could be set down and enjoyed for centuries, millennia to come. This can give us an interesting relationship to memory. Sometimes we start losing our memory and we go, holy cow, or I forgot that. Or now, why is this memory popping up so suddenly? And it can be helpful to realize that sometimes Krishna helps us forget so that we can learn again, and by our example, learning again, share another example. Our own example is shared for others. That makes me feel better about forgetting things. Like, for example, today is day 153 of this sadhana. And 153, when I heard that number in a math class, I was always like, oh, that's an interesting number. And it stuck in my head. It became my favorite number. It has to do with, it's a sum of, anyway, we won't go into that. But ever since I was in high school, it was a special number to me. And then when my mother passed away, she passed away at 153. And I thought, oh, wow. Maybe I knew in some way, but I'd forgotten. Who knows? Maybe it's a coincidence. But also seeing the number 153 made me remember my mother. And for those of you who've lost a loved one, you might relate to this. So when my mother first died, she was on my mind all the time. Not a minute of an hour of a day went by when I wasn't thinking of her. And then as time went on, I'd spend some minutes not thinking of her. And then I go, oh, right. And then hours and come back. And I remember the end of the first day when I hadn't thought about my mom all day, and what a kind of a shock that was. So the 153 helps me remember her today. I'm not sure why I'm meant to remember her today. Maybe as an example for all of us that memory loss can be disturbing, but in some ways it helps us move on. When we've had a big crisis or trauma that's etched in our brains, it's a sign of moving past that when it doesn't take up all of our time. Sometimes, if we're meant to live out a distinct destiny in the material world, it is helpful to forget that we are, in essence, spiritual beings. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to play our parts. It's like a great actor, actress, performer who loses themselves in a role so that we believe them. And again, we receive something of benefit from their example. So let us practice. Just notice how your memory is working or not working as you get into this first pose. Do you remember all the modifications and variations that have been repeated over and over through the videos, or that your own teachers have said? Or do you forget? Or does something pop into your mind while you're doing the balance pose that you've forgotten? Let's explore this idea of memory and our path. Switch. All righty. As we perform our contemplative practice today, there is a meditative technique I learned in a particular tradition. It is called review of the day. And part of it is to help us remember what we did during the day. And you can also kind of observe yourself. Is that something you want to repeat or not? It's a very interesting way to work on our habits, because often in our busy Western world, we just move from one day to the next and we wonder why we keep repeating the same things. So today, if you're watching this later in the day, maybe review the day that's come already. If you're doing this earlier in the day with me live, think about yesterday and just replay it in your mind. Observe as much detail as you can. And note if you learn anything from that review. Here we go. Welcome back. I hope you found that practice useful. In one tradition, it's recommended that you do that every evening before bed. Review the day, and then perhaps contemplate how you want to do the next day the same or differently. Thank you so much for joining today. This was an especially ironic presentation because I was going to do a completely different topic today and I forgot what it was. So here you are. We'll continue working with chapter 18 tomorrow. And if that's enough for you, I'll see you later. However, if you want to know 153 and why it's special, here's why. If you cube 3, it's 27. If you cube 5, so 5 times 5 times 5, that's 125. And if you cube 1, it's 1. If you add 1, 125, and 27 together, you get 153. So it's a number that you can cube each of its digits, add it together, and you get that number. And I don't know why, but it's just a number that's come up in my memory. So please notice what comes up in your memory today. And remember, we're back tomorrow. Until then, no more math tomorrow.